My name is Denise Spate. I'm a sign language interpreter, a trainer, and a job coach. I live in Maryland, but none of those titles mattered the day I almost died. I was 31 years old when everything changed. It started with something that seemed simple: gallstones. I had a procedure to remove my gallbladder, but not long after, I found myself back in the hospital. This time, I was gravely ill. The details are hazy, but I remember one thing with absolute clarity. I could see the medical team working on my body. Yes, I was watching from outside of myself. The ER was frantic, alarms beeping, nurses rushing, and then I focused on a male nurse trying desperately to insert an IV into my arm. Over and over he tried. Big needles, my arms, my hands. It wasn't just physical discomfort, it was fear, real raw fear. My hands are my voice. They're how I speak, how I work, how I connect with my daughter who is deaf. I use my hands every single day to live, to love. I remember thinking, please, don't damage them. I need them. I need to speak to my child. That moment etched itself into my soul. And then, I was gone. The next thing I knew, I was coming back. I gasped awake, and the first thing out of my mouth was a complaint about the needles. I was upset, shaken, and very much alive. The staff was stunned. They hadn't expected me to speak at all, let alone react so vividly. But here's the thing. God wasn't finished with me yet. In Psalm 118:17, it says, "I shall not die but live and declare the works of the Lord." That verse speaks to my experience. I believe I was pulled back for a reason: to share, to serve, to witness. Not just to survive, but to live with intention. There's a story in the Bible about Lazarus. He was dead for 4 days before Jesus called him out of the tomb. When he emerged, people couldn't believe it. But Lazarus had work left to do. So do I. Since that experience, I've seen life differently. I don't take my hands for granted. I don't take time for granted. Every conversation with my daughter is a gift. Every student I train, every client I coach, every soul I encounter, I meet them knowing how fragile life truly is. I share this not just as a testimony of survival, but as a reminder. If you're here for a reason. Don't waste it. We often look for miracles in grand gestures, but sometimes the miracle is simply waking up. Sometimes it's a nurse trying again. Sometimes it's the stubborn beating of a heart that refuses to quit. I'm here, and I won't stop telling this story, because someone out there needs to hear it. Over the next 2 days, something extraordinary happened. I left my body, not once, but again and again. 8 times in total, maybe more. At first, I hovered nearby, watching the nurses, hearing their words, still tethered to the room, to my body, to the chaos. But each time I slipped away, I drifted farther, and something shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. My focus moved from survival to something deeper. The farther I went, the less I worried about what was happening to my body. The pain, the panic, it all faded. In its place came a stillness I can't fully describe. A peace that passed understanding, just like Philippians 4:7 says. I began to see this life differently, not as the end-all, but as the beginning of something far more vast. Like Elijah being taken up in a whirlwind, I felt the pull of something greater. I wasn't just observing a medical crisis. I was touching eternity. And in those moments I knew this truth. There is more. More than this flesh, more than this pain, more than we can grasp from here. And yet, for reasons I'm still discovering, I was sent back, because someone needed to hear this story. Before everything happened, I never gave much thought to the spiritual world. Honestly, I didn't believe in it at all. I was one of those people who figured when you're gone, that's it. No afterlife, no spirit, just silence. I had no religious background, no connection to anything beyond what I could see and touch. But life, or rather death, has a way of shaking what you think you know. Looking back, there was one odd moment, long before my near-death experience, that I'd buried in my memory. I never would have remembered it if what happened later hadn't cracked open something deep inside me. It was years ago. I had just left a family gathering near a place where my aunt by marriage, had lived and been laid to rest. As I was driving away that night, I saw her. I know how that sounds. I brushed it off at the time, chalked it up to being tired, emotional, missing her. I told myself, people imagine things when they're exhausted. But during my near-death experience, there she was again, Kathy, clear as day. Not a memory, not a ghost. She came to me. She wasn't glowing or dramatic. She was simply there, calm, familiar. And there was this gentle strength about her, like someone guiding a child through the dark. She didn't say much, but I knew what she meant. She was helping me let go, helping me release my grip on my physical body, on fear, on control, letting me know it was okay, that I wasn't lost, that this path, as strange as it was, wasn't wrong. It was part of something far greater. And in that moment, I thought of something I'd read later in the book of Hebrews, long after I came back. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Hebrews 1:14. I believe that's what she was doing. Ministering, guiding, protecting. I didn't grow up knowing angels. I didn't grow up reading scripture. But in those moments, I was being taught truths I'd never learned in church. That death isn't abandonment. That God doesn't wait for us to believe in Him before He reaches for us. He meets us where we are, even in doubt, even in disbelief. Kathy's presence reminded me of the story of Stephen in Acts 7. As he was being stoned, the heavens opened, and he saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Even in pain, he was given the peace of knowing where he was going. That moment with Kathy felt like that. A glimpse of something beyond pain, beyond fear. A quiet confirmation that I wasn't alone. Since returning, everything's changed. I no longer live as someone who says, when you're gone, you're gone. Because I've been gone, and I came back. And what I saw, what I felt, what I now know, it's real. It's more real than the hospital bed I laid in. I share this not to convince anyone, but to offer something I wish I'd had before. Hope. If you've ever wondered if there's more, if you've ever lost someone and longed for a sign, hear this. There is more. And love doesn't end at death. I was met with love. I was met with peace. And I was sent back with purpose. She didn't stay long each time, but she was there. I remember her presence, Kathy, appearing during a few of the times I slipped out of my body. It wasn't dramatic or filled with words. It was more like spiritual hand-holding, gentle, steady, reassuring. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone told me what I needed to know. You're not alone, and you don't need to be afraid. And then, at some point, she was gone. It happened gradually, as I began to let go of my attachment to everything familiar, my body, my pain, my roles, even my memories. I felt myself moving beyond her presence, beyond the hospital, beyond everything. And in that moment I realized with an overwhelming clarity, I didn't need to hold on anymore. There was no fear, no regret, just freedom. An unshakable sense that I was being drawn into something much larger than myself. Not away from love, but into it. It was as if everything I had ever longed for, peace, connection, understanding, was suddenly surrounding me. Or, more accurately, I was part of it. The best way I can describe it is all presence. I didn't see faces or hear voices. I didn't need to. I knew, without language, without effort. It was like breathing in truth. I felt known, completely and absolutely, and I knew everything around me was bathed in love that wasn't earned or measured. It simply was. Isaiah 55:9 comes to mind when I try to explain it. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. That was it. I was tasting a higher reality, something beyond human thought, beyond doctrine or debate, something eternal. In those early moments of my near-death experience, I could sense layers, shifts, as I now call them. At first, I was still tethered to my body, aware of the chaos, of the people trying to keep me alive. Then the focus moved. To my daughter, to my loved ones, to all the earthly ties I held so tightly. But as I kept moving, it was like the camera of my consciousness kept pulling back, wider, further. What was once the center of my world, my hands, my work, my fear, began to shrink in significance. Not because they didn't matter, but because I was seeing them from a much greater distance. I started to understand what Paul meant when he wrote in 2 Corinthians 4:18. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. What I saw, what I experienced, was the eternal. I was no longer a patient in a hospital. I was no longer a mother clinging to survival. I was part of something so vast, so good, so completely infused with meaning that the idea of returning felt almost foreign. And yet, even in that infinite beauty, something whispered, "You're not finished." So I returned, changed forever. I carry it with me now, that shift in perspective. That camera never fully zooms back in. I still see the world, but I see it differently. Eternity sits in the background of everything. And when things get hard, when fear creeps in, I remember that sensation of all presence. I remember what it felt like to be known by the one who needs no words. And I keep going, because I was sent back for a reason. Maybe just to remind someone out there today, there's more, and you're never alone. There's something sacred about familiar ground. For me, that place was Laramore Point, Maryland, a quiet spot along the water where my childhood memories still live. It's where my Aunt Kathy once lived. It's also where she was laid to rest. I had spent countless days there as a child, chasing sunlight, breathing in the calm, and storing up moments that would become part of my soul. So when I saw her again, during one of those early spiritual shifts of my near-death experience, it made perfect sense that she brought me there. I didn't just leave my body from a sterile hospital bed. I left from a place I knew by heart. A place full of joy, of life, of love. That sense of familiarity wrapped around me like a warm blanket. It didn't feel strange. It felt intentional, like a gentle invitation to let go. That cliff at Laramore Point became more than just a scenic overlook. It became a symbol. I remember the sensation vividly, standing on that edge, not with my physical body but with my soul, looking out, feeling the tug to leap, to trust. And in that moment, a thought rose from deep within me. Is this what they call a leap of faith? Faith had never been part of my vocabulary before. I wasn't raised in church. I didn't have spiritual traditions to fall back on. But right then, faith didn't feel like religion. It felt like surrender, a peaceful kind of release. Like my soul was whispering, "You won't fall, you'll be caught." It reminds me of the verse from Deuteronomy 33:27. "The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." That's what I felt. Arms I couldn't see, but somehow knew were there, ready to catch me, ready to carry me. The cliff wasn't about danger, it was about freedom. I wasn't falling off, I was rising beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond everything that ever held me back. In that space, time didn't matter. I didn't need to explain it or understand it. I just needed to trust it. And I did. For the first time in my life, I truly let go. I think now about how many of us are standing on some kind of edge. Maybe you are. Facing something uncertain, feeling like you're at the end of your strength. Maybe you're holding on so tightly to what's familiar that the idea of releasing control feels impossible. But I'm here to tell you, when you let go with faith, not fear, you don't fall. You rise. There's a story in the Gospels where Peter steps out of the boat to walk on water toward Jesus. As long as he keeps his eyes on Christ, he walks. But when fear creeps in, he begins to sink. Still, Jesus reaches out, catches him, and lifts him up. Matthew 14:29-31. That's what this felt like for me. A divine reach, a lifting. Laramore Point will always be sacred ground to me. Not because it's where I almost died, but because it's where I learned to live differently. To walk by faith, not by sight. To release fear and embrace what's beyond. And now, I carry that peace with me. Not just for myself, but for anyone who needs to hear this. You're not alone. You can let go, and you will be held. Even now, when I look back on that experience, it fills me with joy. Not fear, not sadness. Joy. Because in those moments, when I was no longer tethered to the physical world, I tasted a freedom I'd never known before. It wasn't just the absence of pain, it was the release of limits. No more weight of the body, no more identity to defend. I was no longer Denise, the interpreter, the mother, the one struggling to survive. I was something more. I was part of something eternal. As I moved farther into that space, I felt myself dissolving into a larger reality. Not losing myself, but rediscovering the truth that had always been within me. It was as if I was being welcomed back into something ancient, something infinite. I wasn't becoming nothing. I was going home. There's a verse in Ecclesiastes 3:11 that says, "He has set eternity in the human heart." I believe that. I felt it. In that sacred space, I didn't learn new things. I remembered everything. Who I truly was, where I came from, what mattered. And the strange part? None of it required effort. The moment I let go of my ego, of the idea that I had to be anything at all, I was filled with all-knowing, all-being. There was no striving, no searching, just belonging. It was like being poured back into the heart of God. That's when I understood. So much of what we call life is actually a forgetting. We forget who we are. We get tangled in roles, stress, performance, fear. But when we step beyond the veil, even for a moment, we're reminded that we are not separate. We're not alone. We never were. I came back changed, not just in perspective, but in purpose. I now live with a deep awareness that this world is not the end. It's just the beginning. And that home I touched, it's waiting for each of us. We're not walking alone. We're on our way back. And the journey, as hard as it may seem, is leading us to wholeness. Along with that overwhelming sense of all-knowing came something else: clarity. A truth I couldn't ignore. I was meant to live with purpose. Real purpose. Not just the busy routine of waking up, working, surviving, but a deeper calling I had ignored until that moment. Up to that point, I had been living like so many of us do, checking boxes, doing what needed to be done, but never asking why my soul was here. I had never truly looked inward, never paused long enough to ask, what was I created for? And yet, there in that sacred space beyond time, the answer was already inside me. I understood that I was part of something eternal, but also called to do something specific. To live not just as a body, but as a soul on assignment. It reminded me of Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. I hadn't been living that way, but now I knew I was being given another chance, and this time I wouldn't waste it. At the very end of my experience, just before returning to my body, I was given a choice. Or at least, that's the only way I can describe it in human language. It wasn't a dramatic conversation or a booming voice. It was more like a knowing, a simple but profound question resting gently in my spirit. Will you go back? It wasn't forced. There was no pressure. I understood clearly that I could remain where I was, completely free, whole, at peace. Or I could return to my physical body. But with that choice came full awareness of what I might be walking back into. I knew my body was fragile. I knew there was a real chance it wouldn't recover completely. I could wake up in pain, disabled, or even in a vegetative state. There were no guarantees, and still, I chose to return. Why? Because I understood more than ever the value of living a purposeful life, even in brokenness, even in uncertainty, even in pain. That realization changed everything. I had spent so much of my life just trying to get through the days, but now I knew I was meant to bring something into this world. Each of us is. We're not random. We don't just show up. We are sent, and we are sent for a reason. In that space beyond time, I saw two threads in my purpose, one personal and one maternal. The personal was this: I was called to live every moment with intention and joy, to help others do the same, to be a light, not because I had all the answers, but because I had come face to face with the source of all peace. I could no longer live small. That aligned so deeply with John 10:10, where Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. That's what I was meant to bring. Not perfection, not control, but joy, fullness, presence. But the second part of my purpose, the one that cut straight to my soul, was about my children. I had invited two souls into this world. I was their mother. And up until that point, I had never fully recognized the weight and beauty of that responsibility. I realized that I hadn't just been raising them. I had been entrusted with them. If I was going to return, I needed to return with the intention to raise them differently. Not just to keep them safe or teach them how to survive, but to prepare them to live, to find their own purpose, to know they are loved, to help them become the kind of people who could look back at their lives one day and say, I didn't just exist, I truly lived. So I said yes. Yes to the unknown. Yes to the possibility of suffering. Yes to the body that might not fully recover. Because the value of returning, of living purposefully, of helping even one person find light in their darkness, that outweighed the risk. And that yes has shaped every moment since. It's why I speak now. It's why I share this story. Not because I think I'm special, but because I know you are. You're here for a reason. You bring something this world desperately needs. And maybe no one has ever told you that. So let me be the one to say it. You matter. You're here on purpose. You're not just here to survive. You're here to bring something, and to take something, to bring joy, love, compassion, light, and to take with you the lessons, the growth, the transformation that only this life can offer. So if you're standing at the edge, unsure if it's worth it, if it's too hard, if your brokenness disqualifies you, hear me clearly. Say yes anyway, because your purpose is still unfolding, and it's far more beautiful than you can imagine. Choosing to come back into this body wasn't obvious at first. In fact, for most of the experience, it felt unlikely. I mean, who wouldn't want to stay in a place where everything makes sense, where there's no confusion, no pain, no regret? In that realm, there's no shame, no guilt, no questions hanging in the air. You don't carry the weight of the past or fear the future. You just are, whole, complete, at peace. I was in a place where I knew everything I needed to know. There was no striving, no explaining, no apologizing. It was like standing in perfect light, where nothing is hidden and nothing needs to be. I was surrounded by love. Not the kind we try to earn, but the kind that just is. Pure, unbreakable. There was no pain, not physically, emotionally, or spiritually. The emotional pain, especially, the baggage we all carry from misunderstandings, disappointments, strained relationships, words spoken too quickly, or not spoken at all. It was gone. That invisible weight we wear in the world had lifted completely. And I remember thinking, why would I ever leave this? But then came a turning point. It wasn't a moment of pressure. It wasn't a command. It was a choice, but not like choosing between chocolate or vanilla. It was a soul-deep decision that pulled on something eternal inside me. At the very core of that moment, something shifted. Everything that wasn't essential, every wound, every fear, every doubt, was stripped away. And what remained was this one clear, radiant truth. Purpose is everything. Not comfort, not safety, not even certainty. Purpose. That was the moment I knew I would return. I understood that even if my body failed me, even if I woke up to suffering or limitation or loss, living a purposeful life was worth it. Because love is worth it. Growth is worth it. People are worth it. The Apostle Paul once wrote in Romans 8:18, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." I finally understood that. Not just with my mind, but with my spirit. The pull to stay in the all-knowing was strong, but stronger still was the call to live, not just to exist, but to live intentionally. To carry what I had experienced back into this world and walk it out in every conversation, every relationship, every quiet act of love. Coming back meant facing the unknown. Pain might be waiting, disappointment, difficulty. But for the first time in my life, those things didn't scare me. They couldn't touch the part of me that had seen what real wholeness was. I didn't come back for myself. I came back because I realized the only thing that matters in this life is how we show up for others. How we love. How we forgive. How we help people remember who they are. And I couldn't do that from the other side. So I said yes. I returned not as the same person, but as someone reborn. Not just because my heart started beating again, but because my spirit had been reset. I no longer cared about the baggage of the past. I didn't need to carry the fear of what was behind me, the shame, the worry, the what-ifs. None of that had value anymore, only purpose did. And now, I live every day with that clarity. When the world is loud, I remember the stillness. When life feels heavy, I remember the weightlessness of love. And when I'm tempted to numb myself or check out, I remember the choice I made. To come back, to be present, to bring light. If you're hearing this right now, maybe it's because you've forgotten that your life has purpose too. Maybe you need a reminder that you're not here by accident. You are loved. You are part of the plan. And no matter the pain, the baggage, or the uncertainty, you can still say yes. Because the purpose waiting on the other side of your surrender is worth it. In the end, even though it was a choice, it didn't feel like one. Not really. Because once I understood that I had something I was meant to do here, returning wasn't a decision I had to weigh. It became the only possible answer. If I had a purpose left to live, then this was the place I needed to be. Earth, this body, this life with all its imperfections. So I came back, even knowing my body might not recover fully, that it might fail me. I still chose to return. Not because I was promised healing, but because I was promised purpose. I think of the words from Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Those words now ring true in a way I never understood before. Hope isn't found in comfort. It's found in meaning. That's what I came back for. And when I woke up, gasping for air in a hospital bed, I wasn't just alive. I was recommitted. I was ready to live with intention. Because once you've seen how precious your purpose is, how much the world needs, what only you can bring, turning back isn't an option. You move forward, even through the unknown. Because your here still matters. Looking back, it's hard to put into words how deeply that experience changed me. I didn't just have a near-death experience. I had a near-eternity experience. I came face to face with what truly matters, and it wasn't achievement, perfection, or control. It was presence. It was purpose. It was love. What I now understand is this. So many of us are walking through life half asleep. We're carrying pain we were never meant to carry alone. We're chasing things that leave us empty. We're listening to voices that drown out the quiet whisper of truth inside our spirit. But the truth is this. You are here for a reason. You're not a mistake. You're not behind. You're not too broken. If you are still breathing, God still has something for you to do. That might not mean fame or fortune. It might mean helping one person feel seen, forgiving someone, healing from something, starting again. When I was out of my body, I realized that nothing in this world, no title, no bank account, no reputation, could follow me. But love, kindness, faith, those things last. Those are the eternal things. And here's the thing that shook me to my core. We don't have to die to wake up. We can choose right now to live differently, more intentionally, more freely, more aligned with what God placed inside of us. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That verse isn't just spiritual advice. It's a wake-up call. We can renew our minds. We can start today. So if you felt lost, stuck, or disconnected, know this: you're not alone. And it's not too late. You were made for more, not more stuff, more meaning. That's why I came back. Not just to live, but to tell you, you are loved, you are chosen, and you are needed. What if everything you've been searching for is already inside you? What if the breakthrough you've been praying for isn't out there, but waiting for you to say yes to your calling. What if today, right now, is the moment you stop just surviving and start truly living? I didn't survive by accident. I came back for a purpose. And maybe you're watching this right now because you need to hear it. So I want to ask you something bold. Have you been living like your life has purpose? Have you been chasing noise or listening to the quiet voice that says, you were made for more? If this message stirred something in you, don't ignore it. That's not just emotion. That's a spiritual nudge. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you feel called to do. Like this video if it hit home. Subscribe so you never miss another message like this. And share this with someone who needs hope. Let's build a space right here where people remember who they are and why they're still here. Because I believe something powerful. When we live with purpose, we unlock God's blessing. And friend, I pray He blesses you richly as you walk into the life you were born for. You're not alone. You're not forgotten. You're just getting started. Now go. Live like it.